Hello and welcome everybody to Ghost Train Comics and the London Calling playlist, the latest entry that we're doing. And today we are looking at one of my favorites, one of the ones, the British comics that influenced me most growing up is 2000 AD. And today we're looking specifically at 2000 AD, the beginning, and issues 1 through 50. We will be doing more of these if you guys like them. As always, like, subscribe, and leave comments to let us know, or reply to polls that we drop regularly on the channel. So we've done previous ones on Action and on Star-Lord a little bit. In the Action video, we did talk a little bit about how Action got a really strong reaction. I mean, it was super violent, and they really hadn't seen anything like it before in British comics. At least in the mainstream comics. Underground is a whole different story that's deliberately pushing the envelope, but regular comics for kids, it was a shocker. And one of the lessons that they learned from it was don't put it in the London High Street, put it in outer space somewhere else, and they'll just go, oh, it's sci-fi nonsense, it's not real. It can't affect our beloved children in the 1970s. So in February 1977, British newsagents received a comic that looked like nothing else on the shelves. It was loud, rebellious, cynical, and dripping with thrill power. Its name was 2000 AD, but it wasn't created in a vacuum. In late 1976, sub-editor Kevin Gosnell noticed early media hype surrounding an upcoming American movie called Star Wars. Sensing a sci-fi renaissance was on the horizon, he pitched the idea for a futuristic action comic to publisher IPC. Now, IPC had just been through the whole Action farrago, and they'd been burned pretty bad on it, even questions in Parliament about the comic, and been grilled on BBC TV. So they still had a secret weapon in their arsenal, which was young, progressive, full of piss and vinegar Pat Mills, and then super stalwart, talented writer who was his partner in crime, John Wagner. There were others involved, of course, people like Carlos Esquerra, who just brought his energy and skill into everything that he did and was as responsible as those gentlemen, as well as people like Kevin O'Neill, without whom the whole 2000 AD ethos would never have survived and prospered the way that it did. R.I.P. Kevin. So they turned to Pat. He had just been through Action and had learned that lesson that I just talked about. So Pat was known for pushing boundaries, like I mentioned. After Action faced severe moral panic and censorship, Pat Mills said, if a hero blows away a human, the press panics. If he disembowels a giant alien or a rogue robot, nobody bats an eye. Mills also created the persona of Tharg the Mighty, a green alien editor from Beetlejuice, known for his consumption of the styrofoam cup. And he demanded absolute excellence from his script droids, and 2000 AD was officially born. Number 1, and they call him Prog, short for program, to give it that kind of 70s, futuristic, everything computery vibe. It hit newsstands on February 26th, 1977. It cost us 8 pence, and came with a free Space Spinner toy. Good luck finding a copy of issue 1 with the Space Spinner intact. This issue debuted 5 original core series. The first story was Invasion. Pat Mills, writer, and Jesus Blasco, artist. In 1999, the far-flung future at the time, Britain is invaded by the hostile Volgans. This was obviously a stand-in for the Russians. A thin allegory for Soviet forces. Lorry driver Bill Savage forms a guerrilla resistance force using nothing but grit, shotguns, and street tactics. So Invasion anchored the magazine in working class anti-establishment rebellion, a core theme that defined early 2000 AD and came straight from the veins of Pat Mills and others. But interestingly, where action just took basic movies and TV shows, we have a certain amount of that, and we'll talk about that in a moment, in early 2000 AD. But for sure, Invasion was more of an original one, and it's a kind of a over-the-top, cliched kind of London truck driver. Dan Dare was the second one. This was a bit cheekier because Pat Mills and John Wagner had kind of put a lot of noses out of joint, so to speak, when they first started creating new characters and new comics in the early to mid 1970s with Battle Action, etc. And there was a lot of the older class who had never moved on from things like Eagle Weekly in the 1950s, post-war into the 1960s, type of British post-imperialist fading dreams of empire, etc. So taking Dan Dare and kind of shaking him up was Massimo Belardinelli was also involved in this. And if you haven't seen Belardinelli's art, you didn't grow up with them like we were blessed to in the UK, with some great Italian, Spanish, Portuguese artists, especially on all the comics from the 1970s and early 1980s. You missed out. You'll see some of it as I put the images up throughout this story. But Belardinelli is like Esquerra. He's just, he's so unique, and it's so hard to describe Belardinelli without actually just showing the art. But he does cosmic craziness like nobody's business. Spaceships, aliens, monsters, fights, battles. Just insane, the talent that Maestro Massimo has. This was an edgy 1970s reboot of the wholesome 1950s space pilot hero from Eagle magazine. Awakened from suspended animation, Dare was thrust into a darker, grid-filled cosmos. It's kind of another one of Pat Mills' meta moments. The third story was Flesh. Now this was brilliant, and this had another great, gritty, non-British artist, Ramon Sola. And what he brought to this one, this was very much a tough kind of a neo-sci-fi western before that was on vogue. It is a dinosaur story, it's also a time travel story, but it's mainly a tough western, and it's almost like the Shark that was a big selling point in action, Hookjaw. It's extremely bloody, so it's a lot of the same themes and a lot of the same commentary on greed, hunger, even, you know, a little bit of the vegetarian lobby, because they run out of meat in the future, and then when time travel is invented, they decide to go back in time and start getting dinosaurs as a source of meat to hunt, kill, and then package up and send into the future. So there's a lot to unpack in a very, very sophisticated idea, even though a lot of the stories were pretty basic. Action, wham bam, dinosaur tearing people's heads off type of thing. And all of the Wranglers were notorious kind of cowboy type characters, very much anti-hero characters for the most part. Flesh was a huge favorite at the beginning. It did come back in the late 80s, early 90s. Pat did a few kind of revisits of it, coming at it from a few different angles, individual characters or natives to, you know, the prehistoric period that it was set in. But yeah, Flesh, the Time Corps was the main kind of corporate company, sending futuristic cowboys back to the Cretaceous period to farm dinosaurs for meat. Naturally, the dinosaurs fight back. Led by Old One-Eye, a vengeful Tyrannosaurus Rex matriarch. Harlem's Heroes was probably... So, the Harlem Heroes was an interesting mix. It was probably the closest one to a movie ripoff, like Action mostly was, but it's a little bit different. They did take some of the rollerball ideas of a future sport mashup involving jetpacks, basically football to jetpacks, and later motorcycles as well came into it. But they put a very unique spin on it, and a very interesting progressive spin, given a lot of the British social, racial politics and the cultural mix at the time. So by the point of the 1970s, you had a lot of native British people who were of non-white origin. So there was a lot of factors coming into it. And with Harlem Heroes, it was an all-black team in a comic that was selling, you know, to the British youth at the time, that was increasingly mixed. And it was such a revelatory representation. And it was definitely very Pat Mills. Now, what's interesting here is that Dave Gibbons was chosen because he had drawn comics featuring black characters, just like Brian Boland had, for I believe it was Nigerian company. And they had done a lot of work on those, so they'd gotten really good facial references and doing accurate representations of non-white individuals. So Harlem Heroes was super smart because they mixed that kind of representative strip with sports and with the future appeal of rollerball. Still super violent, a lot of people died in it. A high-speed cybernetic death sport called Jetball, featuring the Harlem Heroes team battling across lethal futuristic arenas. Yes, Mach-1 was the exception to what I was talking about up above, in that it was a straight-up Bionic Man ripoff, based on the American TV show, based on the novel Cyborg. It was, now, of course, given that it was Pat Mills and that it was kind of edgy UK progressive 2000 AD, they did introduce a lot of suspicion of authority, sketchy missions. I mean, they had some of that honestly in Bionic Man as well, but you also had a grounded, you know, trusted boss, trusted authority figure in Oscar Goldman. You didn't really get that in Mach-1. And the M.A.C.H is man activated by computerized hypoacupuncture. This was by Pat Mills and Ennio. John Probe is a British secret agent boosted by computerized hyperacupuncture and bioimplants. So it's actually quite funny, quite clever the way, and I'm sure this was done in an afternoon before popping out to the pub with Pat and John and the others involved, just kind of scripting up a few ideas. How can we cover it up a little bit so it's not as much of a copy? But $6 Million Man, far more ruthless. This one came back for quite a few runs, did spawn a second series, which was Mach-0, which was about the kind of experimental version before John Probe. Now that was the initial lineup with Prog 1. Obviously there's one big one that's missing, and some of you may have noticed that already, which is Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd didn't start until Prog 2, which is why Prog 2 is worth considerably more than Prog 1, which is unusual in any type of collecting. Well, first appearance always boosts the cost, the value of something. 2080's most iconic character almost made the debut issue, but creator team John Wagner and Carlos Ezquerra needed one extra week to finalize the strip, so it missed the cutoff point. This was set in the sprawling dystopian megalopolis of Mega City 1. Street judges act as police, judge, jury, and instantaneous executioner. It was a satire on that type of Dirty Harry, you know, right-wing kind of obey the law, there is no excuse, blah, blah, blah. Marvel did a little bit of that with The Punisher. As the early series wrapped up their initial storylines, Mills and Gosnell cycled in new experimental concepts to help keep reader engagement sky high. Shako, the jaw-snapping terror of the Arctic. This series followed a rogue, highly aggressive polar bear hunting CIA capsule retrievers across the ice. Give you a moment to take that in. That is quite a Tharg's Future Shocks, self-contained short sci-fi stories featuring twist endings. This anthology within an anthology became a training ground for legendary talent like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison in later years. Inferno this came in Prog 36. This was a direct sequel to Harlem's Heroes, escalating jetball into an even more dangerous combat sport. We also got some great Belardinelli art on that one that really just sticks in my mind even when the stories don't. Walter the Wobot even got his own spin-off strip. His lisping, loyal cleaning droid proved so popular he earned his own comedy spin-off strip in the comic's 50th issue. So guys, that's it for the first kind of rollout. I will be doing issue 51 through to 100 next. That has some really big highlights, like the merger with Star-Lord, and then the last few, most of the last few Dan Dare storylines as we start. One of my points with these is to kind of raise awareness for the demand from me anyway, and from anybody else I've talked to who's familiar, is for a proper rescan and reprinting of 2000 AD from Prog 1, similar to what they've done with Misty, some of the Jinty stories, and what is happening with Star-Lord, and what has happened with Action. 2 more volumes of Action reprints before the ban coming out in 2027. So that is my wish, to have 2000 AD go through the same thing. Thank you so much. As always, would love to have you subscribe and have you drop a like, a share, and drop any comments that you have. But until next time, thank you and stay safe.